I was just looking through the bill here, and I urged some caution yesterday in the meeting with the leaders and the governor that the state constitution, sorry to get so far in the weeds, the state constitution is very clear. And why don't I just read it to you so that I don't have to paraphrase it for you. Article 4 of the Constitution, Section 17 says, "No law shall embrace more than one subject, comma, which shall be expressed in the title." Okay, members, I have the bill. I'm looking at the title. There is nothing in this title that says anything about taxes. 3.5 pages of this bill are on education finance, and the balance, 208, are about taxes. And it's not expressed in the title. Not only does it violate the single subject rule of putting education finance with tax policy, clearly separate topics, it violates the single subject and the fact that what's in the bill is not expressed in the title. This bill is clearly unconstitutional, and I just would say, those of you Minnesotans that are watching, if there's something in this bill that bothers you, and maybe it's this, the fact that multinational corporations are going to get $200 million of tax relief in this bill. If that bothers you, contact an attorney, because this bill is unconstitutional and the courts will throw it out. Absolutely. And there's been a number of cases in front of the Supreme Court, and that's always what they reference, the single subject and is the subject addressed in the title. And guess what? Most times, every time I've looked at, the things have been expressed in the title, and the courts have, other than one time, the courts have let the bill stand. But not this time, because they always reference, well, yeah, the provision you're suing about is expressed in the title, so I guess it can be in the bill. People knew it was in there. It's not in the title this time. This is going to be a different challenge. If you're a teacher and you want to get the kind of continuing education that you get through the staff development in our schools, that's gone now. Now that can be transferred over to any general purpose. So if you're a teacher that thinks, gosh, I'm not going to be able to benefit from staff development dollars anymore, contact an attorney, because the Supreme Court will throw this bill out. If you're a parent of an early childhood student, because of the transfer of the community ed money in here, a lot of schools are going to have to cut early childhood funding. If your child's not going to have early childhood funding any longer because the money is being transferred out of community ed to some other purpose, call an attorney, because you have been damaged by this bill and the Supreme Court will throw it out. So members, not only is it a huge tax break for multinational corporations to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars, that's reason enough to vote against it in itself. You know, members, when we get sworn in here on the first day of session, we all take an oath to abide by the Constitution. And a green vote on this bill is pretty clearly a violation of the Constitution to me. Now, the courts will have to decide that. We're not going to get to decide that on the floor. But members, this bill is a huge giveaway to big corporations that are bringing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars of profits into this state who don't want to be taxed on it. That's shameful. Shameful. And the education portion, let's not fool anybody that there is new money for schools in here. I told you the community ed money is going to be fungible now and be able to be transferred. Staff development money, which schools already have, is now going to be fungible and be able to be moved around. Neither one is new money. And guess what? The other piece of the education is, maybe I can read it to you. $50 million transferred from the state's budget reserve to schools. Well, I mean, we came into this session with a $329 million surplus, and many have heard me say, we just can't seem to spend enough. We had a $1.4 billion surplus when you took over 2 years ago, and we've spent it all, and now we just aren't quite spending enough. So even at a time of economic growth, when we have positive GDP growth, let's take an extra $50 million out of the budget reserve so we can spend just a little more. And members, the tax provisions in this bill, once the tax cuts are fully phased in, things like the corporate income tax cuts that are in the bill, this bill has a huge impact on the money that's going to be available in future bienniums for future legislatures to spend money on things that we all agree on. And once it's all phased in, and maybe I'm too old to be here, but you're going to come back here, many of you are going to come back here, and there's going to be no money, and you're going to say, well, what happened? Where'd the money go? And all you have to do is take a look back at this bill and see how these tax cuts were phased in, and phased in years so they're not even on the sheet of paper. I mean, here's the spreadsheet. Guess what? The tax cuts don't show up on here because we're tricking you, Minnesotans. We're putting it in the years that aren't on the sheet so that you can't see it, so you don't really know what's happening because it's not on the spreadsheet. But next year when we come back, guess what? It'll be on the sheet because we'll be one biennium further down the road, and the impacts of today are going to start to show up in tax reductions and less revenue available for schools. And if you're a school board member, you ought to be against this bill because you're getting tricked. This is a bait and switch. They're dangling a little carrot out in front of you. They're letting you move a little money around, and then they're taking $50 million out of the state's budget reserve, all one-time stuff. And then it's going to go away. And then when the tax cuts in the big piece of the bill, everything but 3.5 pages, are all phased in, there is going to be no money. And you school board members are going to be at the legislature saying, well, we need 1.5 and 1.5 on the formula, or we need 2% and 2% on the formula. Guess what? Save your gas money, because there will be no money to come here to advocate for because of the tax provisions in this bill. So, members, I have never felt stronger about voting against a bill on the floor than I do right now. So I really, for constitutional reasons, because I take abiding by the Constitution seriously, for the tax reasons in here, for the bait and switch that it's one-time money, and some of it you already have, most of it you already have in your schools, we're just letting you use it a little different way. It's an absolute shell game. So I would encourage a no vote.
Senator Gazelka.